readers,
reviewers,
history lovers,
lend us your ears. Welcome to the Brothers Gwynne, as we today talk about historical fiction recommendations based on era. A while ago we talked about beginner historical fiction and people seem to enjoy that, and yeah, one of our main aims on the channel is to get more people interested in reading historical fiction. Wow, we're only 20 seconds in, I've said historical fiction like 3 times.
Yeah, I've got the tally here.
Yeah, we're going to be going through this chronologically. I know we're organised for once, so we're going to go from the classical period all the way up to the modern period. So Ed, you know what I say, let's stop talking about what we're going to do and let's just start doing it.
Let's dive in.
Let's go into the classical era. So yeah, we don't have many props for this one, we do for the others, so I thought some Latin will do just nicely. Carpe diem, seize the day, everyone. It's a good message, isn't it? But yeah, not the reason I chose it, just because it's Latin.
I left my bronze breastplate at home, sorry.
As you do, but Ed, kick us off.
The first one for me, it is in Anno Domini, but it's Boudica. Of course, you guys know me. You know I'm going to talk about this at any opportunity. Boudica, Dreaming the Eagle by Amanda Scott. I'll say it again, this is the Robin Hobb of historical fiction. I think this should be on everyone's to-read list if you want to try some historical fiction, because it is the tale of Boudica. She is a feminine hero who is wonderfully written. She has so many things about her that make her a special person, and she's not hyper-masculine. You know, sometimes the main character who's a female, if she's a warrior, then lots of authors will just make them basically their men, but they've just had a bit of a makeover, really, haven't they? But Boudica is her own person. She struggles and deals with all of these feminine issues, and all, you know, she rises to the challenge as well, and she is just an amazing character. Amanda Scott has created a world here that is breathtaking. If you don't know the story of Boudica, then don't Wikipedia it, read it through here, and enjoy it while it lasts.
It's a good advice, it's a bit of good advice. But next up, I have Gates of Athens by Conor Iggulden. Conor Iggulden is one of the most renowned and respected historical fiction writers, and yes, I absolutely adore his Gates of Athens book. So in this we have 3 main perspectives, all who live and reside within Athens, and this shows us the Battle of Marathon, one of the most famous conflicts of all time, as well as Thermopylae, which is 300, and some naval conflicts as well in a war, the one of the Greco-Persian wars, which changed the world. If the conflict ended differently, then I think we'd be living in a very different place, because the Persian Empire,
Athens,
maybe the Persian Empire would most likely have gone and conquered a large portion of Europe, and yes, so we may not have seen the Roman Empire and all these things that we come and know today. But yeah, so
Boudica wouldn't have even been a book.
Well,
so
we'll never know, will we? But perhaps not. But Gates of Athens, yeah. So it's really interesting in how influential this period of history is on the millennium that followed. But I also loved the political intrigue, how we are shown the dynamic of Athens, which they say is democratic. It's not really, it's more than most places, but it's only for a select group of people. But yes, it's really interesting in that way, and yeah, this is ancient Greece, and if you want a little taste of it, read Gates of Athens.
Talking of gates, we're going from Gates of Athens, to Gates of Fire, to Gates of Fire. And Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. This is the story of 300, Frank Miller's 300, but this is the real version, and Stephen Pressfield is one of my favourite authors. He has this kind of this modern voice, but that also feels so applicable to all these this different time period in the classical period as well. He has such a grasp kind of the cultures, of the language as well, and it feels like maybe kind of if these characters are so philosophical, and there is quite a commentary on war, on brotherhood, on friendship, on love, and on hatred, which is fascinating to read about. And Stephen Pressfield is kind of a very has this wonderful authorial voice, that is just very evoking, thought-provoking as well. It's very evocative.
It really is,
and
indeed.
Yeah, it's so easy to get stuck into, and I love reading this. I can't wait to read it again. But this is on my top 3 novels ever. I think it was anyway. Sometimes it changes, but it's always in the top 4 at least.
And it's a standalone as well, which is a huge benefit.
It's pretty short, but it's so easy to read as well. And the ending is again just breathtaking. We've got these stories that we actually know about. We've heard about Boudica, we've heard about 300. We know how it ends, and that probably makes it even more heartbreaking.
But also, it's an art that you can still have someone emotionally engaged when you do know that ending.
Yeah, 100%.
And Stephen Pressfield does it wonderfully. And now for you've done your classical recommendations. The last one then is The Wolf Den by Lodi Harper. So again, this is not again actually. This is Rome, ancient Rome, not ancient Greece. So we are in Pompeii, and this is through the perspective of a woman who is a slave forced to work in a brothel. So The Wolf Den does a wonderful job at character study. This is a hard read at times, so it's not for the faint of heart, and if those kind of themes will trouble you, do not read The Wolf Den. But otherwise, I'd recommend strongly that you read this, because it is fantastically written, a great character study. These characters feel so real and vivid, and the way that these women in particular react to the situation that they are in is really interesting, because they go in different directions, but it stems from the same cause, the same catalyst. And I just love how Lodi Harper really works on the world building. It really shares the hegemonic values of this society, but without it being too overwhelming or being force-fed either. It's really just natural growth throughout it all, with character, plot, world building. The whole lot is done brilliantly, and Lodi Harper, as he said with Stephen Pressfield, has a fantastic authorial voice which really just eases you along the pages. This is a really just smooth read that really is thought-provoking, and yeah, I just blitz my way through this because, as I said, it's so easy to read. And so yeah, that is The Wolf Den by Lodi Harper. Ed, are you ready for the Dark Ages?
Oh, what do you think, mate? I was born ready.
I'd say that was a yes. So yeah, we're now going to head into the Dark Ages, otherwise now in later years has been known as the early medieval period. And so shall I kick us off, Ed, as you're laying down that mighty weapon of yours?
Yeah, you should punch us off.
I'm going to start with some Bernard Cornwell, one of the most famous writers of historical fiction. He has, of course, written the Saxon Stories, which has been adapted into The Last Kingdom on Netflix, but he has also written a Arthurian series, which this is a trilogy called The Warlord Chronicles, and it begins with The Winter King. And so this is historical fiction. There are little elements of fantasy, but they're not fantasy, but it's the religious beliefs of these characters and how they read omens and signs in that way. But you could read it as historical fiction if you like as well. And Bernard Cornwell does an absolutely incredible job with the characters here. Derval is one of my favourite characters of all time. Often with the main role who's a good person. They're often not your favourite, are they? Because they're kind of a bit boring in a way. They're a bit like Luke Skywalker, good character, but not many people say. Not many people say that they're their favourite character. But in this, it really is, and there's a great cast of characters. Bernard Cornwell writes action like almost no one else, and there's really heartfelt moments of just absolute heartbreak at times. Really, I cried multiple times throughout this series, but also felt the adrenaline.
I need to write to Bernard Cornwell to thank him, really, don't I?
From doing your job,
doing
making
what
me cry.
I couldn't do.
But yeah, that is The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell.
And for me, then, The Whale Road, Robert Lowe is kind of my favourite Viking series. This is Robert Lowe was a reenactor as well, so obviously I love those kind of geeky details that he has in these books. But The Whale Road, you follow the perspective of a young boy called Orm. Well, he's about 16 years old, and he's his father basically comes along to pick him up and says, "You're coming with the Viking crew that I hang out with at the weekends, and you're
in those words,
you're pretty much going to join me." And then Orm goes on this crazy journey, and their mission is to discover and find the hoard of Attila the Hun's treasure. And there is a whole whole thread of this in the Volsung saga, which was a saga written in the Dark Ages. So a very authentic text, and it goes into detail about the role of Attila the Hun and his wife, and these tribes in Germania, I believe anyway. But yeah, so it's amazing. This kind of got a little bit of mythology behind. It's got that legendary talk about Attila the Hun, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
But The Whale Road is not the greatest book in the series, but what I say is it kickstarts the best series about the Viking Age peoples, for me anyway. And this is followed closely in second place by the next pick. But yeah, Robert Lowe will always be my favourite, I think. It's absolutely just, I love the authorial voice he has here. And also the way that the characters, they go to different areas that we haven't even experienced within the Viking Age before, which is probably one of the main aspects of why I enjoy it so much, because it feels very fresh.
Very nice, Ed. Very nice indeed. Yeah, I've read the first 2 installments. Well, Rhoda says good. The second installment is great. Yeah. And yeah, so now next up, my second
I think
book.
you should use a different word than great, Will.
Fantastic.
Keep it coming.
Excellent. There we go. Ed's happy with that now. So next up,
another one
matches the cover. So that was good timing, actually. Ed.
Thank you.
Wolf of Wessex by Matthew Harvey is another standalone, as we talked about earlier. It's great to have some standalones because, especially if you're a fantasy reader, there's a lot of tomes and huge fantasy series out there. So it's nice to break out a bit of a palate cleanser, a bit of a swifter read that you can really invest yourself in, but know it's going to come to a satisfying conclusion. Not 7,000 pages down the line. So yeah, that is Wolf of Wessex. So this is a standalone. It's got a kind of investigative aspect to it where there's a murder done for some political reasons. I won't give much more away from that. No. And our main character, he's kind of retreated from the world after being a warrior because he regrets the lifestyle he has lived. He has a lot of regrets, to put it simply. And he's trying to repent for what he has done. And he has a dog. So everyone who loves an animal companion, read.
And the dog is called Odin.
The Wolf of Wessex.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
And the next one for me is, I love Giles Christian's God of Vengeance. This is the Saga of Sigurd. Now, this is the second Viking trilogy that Giles Christian wrote. And it is a prequel to the first trilogy about Raven. So this is about Sigurd, who was a young boy. He's the son of a Jarl, so the son of a lord, up in Norway in the late 8th century. And another reason why, I love these Viking Age books is just the whole mythology behind these peoples. And Giles Christian and Robert Lowe they have a way of connecting to these characters, making these characters feel very real and visceral, but also having this voice that just makes you know immediately that you are reading a Giles Christian Viking Age tale. The way they speak, the way they describe everything. He's a wonderful writer. The prose is beautiful.
Oh, his prose is magical.
And it is very poetic and lyrical, and it's got an amazing rhythm to it. Also the characters here are fantastic. It does remind me of hanging out with the Northmen in The Blade Itself. Hanging out with Sigurd's crew here. They're hilarious. They've got some really funny moments, but there are also some really heartfelt moments as well, and some amazing set pieces. But I think Giles Christian and Robert Lowe are at the top of their game. And if I was ever going to recommend any early medieval period Dark Ages books, it would be these two, because people should just definitely go check them out. Giles Christian's a great chap.
And also with this trilogy, if you break it down, it is a story of revenge, isn't it? Yeah. And everyone, well, not everyone, but many people love a good tale of revenge. Yeah. And it is revenge. You are rooting for this character.
Yeah, this is the historical fiction best served cold, really, isn't it?
Nicely put, Ed. You're good with those one-liners. And yeah, that is our Dark Ages early medieval.
We can turn the lights on again.
He's been waiting to say that joke for a long time.
I just made it up on the spot. Oh no, he's gone full medieval. You know you're medieval when you sharpen your pencil.
I have given myself
with a bacillard
over to the dance of the medieval period. So now let's begin talking about the medieval period. I'm going to put this away because
they wouldn't hold it like that.
It is pretty it is pretty sharp, so I'm just gonna keep it safe in there.
Do you want me to look after it for you?
That's alright, I'll hold it, as you're going to talk about the first medieval book, if that is alright. So Ed, kick us off with some medieval recommendations.
For me, it's one I read very recently, and it is Essex Dogs by Dan Jones. This is Saving Private Ryan, set in the 14th century. I absolutely love Essex Dogs because Dan Jones has this fantastic way of writing where he's not too bogged down with the details, but he has enough of these quirky things that really make you understand and feel that you are reading a medieval book. This is kind of a story of war and friendship as well, and it details the campaign, the beginning of the campaign anyway, of Edward III's march. And his conquering
in the
journey.
Years' War between England and France.
Yeah, that's the one. And it is fantastic. I love the way that Dan Jones carves characters out of history. He's taken these historical figures and he's breathed life into them in ways that you really didn't think that they would be acting as well, which I absolutely love. Some choices here that I didn't expect, and I was totally here for it. I really enjoyed it. It was so much fun. It's one of those few books that, I mean, obviously we love all these books. A lot of them are so intense as well. This has certainly some intense moments, but I haven't had so much fun reading a book in a really long time. And I think if you're going to try historical fiction, this is one. You know, it's the first book out, so, you know, go support, you know, a new series out there as well, and it is a gem of a book.
Yes, I also had Essex Dogs out, and I'd say this in this Dan Jones sews together a tapestry of excellence that really shows the wider aspects of campaigns, but giving us a very intrinsic internal look at it, which is quite intimate as well, because we follow a group of warriors who are there to make money and survive, but also there's heart added to the story on top of all that reality and grimness, with that the main aim of the Essex Dogs is to keep each other alive. It says on the back, some men fight for glory, others fight for coin. The Essex Dogs fight for each other. And that really adds my Bacillard drop. I won't actually drop your one in.
No, please don't.
Too priceless. But yes, that is Essex Dogs. And Ed, do you want to talk about the next one?
Yes, so The Ill Midnight by Christian Cameron is a coming-of-age story set 10 years after Essex Dogs at the Battle of Poitiers. That's near the beginning. And what I really enjoy about this book is the grasp of armour and the weapons and all that kind of stuff that the author writes about. And it is a lot of fun as well. It's one of my favourite series. There's quite a few out there, so yeah, but it's well worth checking out.
Very nice. And next up, I have the last of the medieval lot we're going to be talking about, and that is Lionheart by Ben Kane. I believe Ben Kane is more well known for his Roman works, but I have chosen Lionheart. I've read this trilogy, so this is about Richard the Lionheart. He is such a well-known historical figure in history, known for the Crusades especially. But it was a figure that, even though you hear about him like in the myth of, or the folklore of Robin Hood a lot, something I didn't actually really know many details about, and so this was really enlightening, but in a way that I'd say this is beginner historical fiction, because you are not overwhelmed with the detail. Ben Kane really knows his stuff, it feels like, but he makes sure to drip feed it. He doesn't overwhelm you, but at the same time I think he strikes a great balance of immersing you at the same time. And your main character Ferdia, otherwise known as Rufus, somehow his life becomes intertwined with Richard the Lionheart, and from there on in we are exposed to the goings on, the political intrigue of all the action that unfolds, some crazy events, as well as some that you just know how it's going to end, but it still gets you. So there you go, that is Lionheart.
So there you go.
That is the medieval period.
Will, can you just see if I've missed a spot?
Yeah, you missed a bit just there. Look, I'll do it for you.
No, because you'll commit Sudoku on me.
Do you mean seppuku, or do you rather me play in some rows and columns? And there is our segue into the early modern period. So we haven't got as many books for this, so we've combined the years 1500 to 1800, so the Tudor period and the early modern period, into one, and that is what we'll be talking about today.
We do have an unholy amount of props, don't we? I'm actually impressed.
We do, don't we? Yeah. I mean, it was just falling from the sky, wasn't it?
New Kill Bill coming soon. Oh, hang on. Kill Bill.
Very creative, Ed, because my name is William. Well done.
Oh, no. Will sprained my thumb the other day. I don't know if you can see that.
Prove it.
Pretty bruised.
I don't think that was me.
You should see the other guy.
Yeah, exactly. You definitely didn't name me as the one who's doing it. But first up, I have Wolfall by Hilary Mantel. So this is in the Tudor period. We follow Thomas Cromwell as he exposes many of the goings on with Henry VIII, one of the most influential figures in English history, created the Church of England, really shook up the political world there.
Divorced, beheaded, died.
Divorced, beheaded, survived. His 6 wives. So yeah, we exposed to a few of those here.
Rhymed.
And Thomas Cromwell, he's a really interesting figure who he doesn't star as one of the aristocracy, which is really interesting in a time like this with their hegemonic values. Very difficult, nigh impossible to raise yourself through the ranks, but Thomas Cromwell somehow finds a way to do it, and part of that is through his supreme intelligence. And it is so interesting following Thomas Cromwell through Wolfall, and Hilary Mantel writes it fantastically, and this has become a phenomenon in recent years for a reason. And
the next one for me is actually, I'm not going to say it's YA, because that'll put people off on it, so I won't say it. But they're brilliant. This is Young Samurai, the novels by Chris Bradford. I read, I think there's 7 or 8 of these, and I read them when I was a young teenager, and they are fantastic. it is about a character from, I think he's from Britain, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think he's from England, and he lands in Japan, and basically they teach him all the way. So it is a bit whitewashing, like The Last Samurai kind of thing. But it is a great ride. There are so many amazing set pieces. Chris Bradford's a great writer. Now, even though it's it's for young readers, it is a series that really had emotional moments, and the writing is very proficient.
It's not YA in the sense of love triangles and all that thing. It's YA in the sense that it is applicable and that younger people can read them as well.
If you like the kind of go to school aspect of the Poppy War, then you will love this because this is basically like it for 3 books, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then the rest after that are adventures. And basically Chris Bradford takes, in the later series anyway, he takes kind of films that he loved and then he writes his own version. So, for example, there is actually a Magnificent Seven, aka Seven Samurai kind of thing going on here, which is just absolutely fantastic. But I love it. And, it's samurai action. It's got me written all over it. Well, it's got Chris Bradford written on it, but...
It's got your heart.
Yeah, that's it.
So next up I have Orinoco by Aphra Behn. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. So many argue that this is the first novel. For many a year it was kind of recognised that Robinson Crusoe was the first novel, but Virginia Woolf said that this actually was. And so obviously very progressive. First novel potentially by a woman. And so this is a very old book, but it is very progressive, whilst at the same time still being very outdated. In many of its
historical fiction.
It is historical fiction because it's written about a real historical figure. So this is about Orinoco, who's kind of a chief in Africa, and he is taken as a slave because of a kind of forbidden romance kind of thing. And he's taken as a slave, but he's a very awe-inspiring figure. And this is about how wrong imperialism is, but also Aphra Behn's view that it is... also allows these stories to be shared. So she does criticise imperialism and the British Empire, which is very interesting considering the time it was written. Yeah. So this is one of those that you have to go in remembering it is also very outdated in many of its themes. And if that's a trigger for you, this is a warning. Do not read Orinoco, but I think it's very interesting. Not only reading this, I think it's very easy to read and very engaging, but also thinking of that historical background just really highlighted the read for me and made it even more enjoyable.
And the last one for me in the early modern period is another samurai book, James Clavell's Shogun. The year is 1600. We are in Japan again, and we are looking at the character of John Blackthorne, who is a European kind of trader. And he has landed on the beaches of Japan, and it's in a time of strife in Japan where the shogun is deciding basically that whether he should hang out with the Europeans and give them a bit of money and their time or not. And lots of people in the shogun court do not want him to do that. So John Blackthorne is a captain of a ship, and then a samurai lord kind of uses him to get to know things about the Europeans, so he can kind of use it to his own gain. And this is a character study essentially of John Blackthorne, and it is brilliant. What I love about it is how it kind of discovers and really gets to grips with all the different classes of Japan and all these different things that John Blackthorne just is then able to go and experience. And what I like about this book, it's not like The Last Samurai where he learns to be a samurai and then he just kicks everyone's ass basically. That's not going to happen. He is helpless, this guy. He is a fish out of water. And
sounds really interesting.
He's just at the disposal of, if these samurai, if he not annoys someone, they'll just cut off his head. And he lives his whole time in fear, but he kind of gets to, see the culture, and he grows to love people there. He grows to hate people there, and he really gets involved. And the pacing is fantastic. It's a slow burner, but I love that about this book.
Yeah.
It just feels like you're really actually living in.
It's a lot of political intrigue then.
100%, and you follow a few different POVs as they go around. But yeah, it's really exciting, and yeah, I love it. I cannot wait to read it again. I've only read it twice, so I definitely need to read that again.
It's one of those. Not only are you recommending it to those watching, you're recommending it to me. So very nice. I'll be picking that up soon. And
if you don't read it, well, you know what's going to happen.
So Ed, is this how people used to brush their teeth?
No, that's how they'd floss.
Oh, I should have guessed.
This is how they brush their teeth.
I can see a very effective way of doing that.
Thank you.
And that is our segue into the modern period. We've had to get creative.
Wait, just take the gun off me.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Very nice, Ed.
Josie Whale style. Cheers,
Very
guys.
nice. That is our segue, as I said, into the modern period. So this is from 1800 to modern day.
And we've got. I'm wearing velour. What a terrible.
And then I'm
juxtaposition.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you should be holding
It's
that.
quite oxymoronic, if I'm honest.
Don't call me moronic.
But do you want to start with your first modern book?
I would love to. The first one I'm going to choose is another book I hark on about, and this is Lucia St. Clair Robson's Ride the Wind. This is the story of Cynthia Ann Parker, a young girl who was living in Texas, and she was abducted by a band of Comanche, who were a band of Native Americans in the 19th century. And she goes on to become indoctrinated into a band of Comanche, and then she grows to love this culture. Like John Blackthorne, she has relationships with people. At first she's treated a little bit like a slave, then a daughter, and then eventually as a chief's wife. And it is a true story about Cynthia Ann Parker, and it is heartbreaking. There, you will get to know her husband, Wanderer, Petanacona, and then you'll also get to know her child, Quanah Parker, who was the last chief of the Comanche. And I think this is a story that's hugely, hugely important for people to read, because it's a period of America that lots of people don't really know too much about, because it's not really it's not talked about that much.
No.
And I follow a lot of people on Twitter who are always talking about kind of rights for Native Americans and all that kind of stuff, and you just see that in schools this kind of stuff isn't taught. People don't know the history of it. And they don't know the very bloody stage that America was in, and I think it's really important.
In A-level I studied it, but before that I didn't really.
Yeah, and I think especially as people obviously a little bit older than you, a little bit older than me as well, that wasn't
exactly
something to study
very
at school.
new. Yeah.
So, but this book is amazing because on Goodreads it says it's a romance, which it really isn't. There is romance in here, but it's more just life really. There is slice of life here. You experience the highs and the lows of just living in this time period as hunter-gatherers, traveling across the Great Plains, and it is exhilarating. It will make you weep as well, and it's just a beautifully written book that is very, very powerful.
And the first of the modern books I'm going to show is At Night All Blood is Black, and so this is written by David Diop.
What a title.
This has been translated into English. The original title in French is called Blood Brothers. So both titles are very, very well related to the story within the pages, very apt indeed. So this is about World War I, two soldiers from Senegal on the front line, and one of them is mortally wounded, and he asks his best friend, to end his misery, to kill him because he's in too much pain, and his friend cannot bring himself to do it, and afterwards he loathes himself, sees himself as a coward for not being able to do that. And he feels like he should have been able to for his friend. And so he goes on a quest. Well, it's not romanticised at all. He goes on a mission every night to sneak into no man's land and to kill an enemy soldier, and he takes a trophy each time, and he starts to become renowned.
As in like a
amongst
belt
his
buckle,
well, I won't spoil it. I won't. He starts to become renowned amongst those in his own troop, and at first he's heralded as a hero, but after a while people start to think that he's a bit of a monster and they need to stay away from him. And this is a character study. It shows a descent into madness, how we have it's about trauma, about World War I, about the pressures put on society, and it's really, really interesting. Not for the faint of heart. There's no happy part to this book at all. We're also showing flashbacks into his childhood, so we really see where a lot of these issues stem from. And it's just a really interesting tale about duty, friendship, as I said, that descent into madness, and how fragile humanity is. And yeah, it's an astounding story, but one, as I said, that is not one with many laughs. So yeah, that is At Night All Blood is Black.
Thank you. And the last one for me for today's video is a Larry McMurtry book, and it's not the one you thought I would choose. It's not Lonesome Dove. This is actually chronologically the first. Well, chronologically in terms of the book, is the first of the Lonesome Dove series. But it was the second one to be, no, the third one I believe to be written actually. I think it was Lonesome Dove, Streets of Laredo, Dead Man's Walk, then Comanche Moon. So the latter two, then the first two are written. But anyway, I love this book because it introduces the characters of Woodrow McCall and August McCrae. And the reason why I would recommend people read this book and Comanche Moon before they read Lonesome Dove is to really fall in love with these characters. Lonesome Dove will have you fall in love with them even more, but it just the end of that book, the emotions are even more heightened, purely because you know the journey they've been through when they were young men here. So this is when they were like 18, 19 years old. Comanche Moon is when they're in their late 20s, and Lonesome Dove is when they're much older. They're grizzled veterans, and it is a cowboy story, but it is a story of two young men who, with a group of people in the Texas Rangers. They really haven't got a Scooby what they're doing with their lives, and they are just trying to survive basically. And there is a Comanche band leader who is on the hunt for them, and just the way that Larry McMurtry interweaves characters. If you're a fantasy fan, he is the historical fiction version of Joe Abercrombie, 100% down to a T. The way he blends POVs, the way you meet them, the way he mixes them all together, and the humour. I've never read anyone as funny as
yeah, you said it's very quirky.
It is quirky humour. That's one thing I love about westerns. But Larry McMurtry just has this voice and a way of writing westerns that no one else probably can reach, because yeah, it's just breathtaking. And the characters, that you will love them. They are so funny, and there's quite a few characters. So if you don't like one of them, then you'll love the other. Yeah, they have some extremely intense set pieces here. There is, if you know a little bit about this period of the Texas Rangers and the American West, you might see characters like John Glanton, that kind of thing, who crop up, who were historical figures. You might have seen them in other books as well. So yeah, definitely go check out Dead Man's Walk. There's a lot of walking though.
No idea that there's going to be some walking in that. And the last one we're going to be talking about today is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. So this is a book that can be labelled as so many different genres.
Opinion.
It does. Absurdism, science fiction, historical fiction. So we follow Billy Pilgrim, and we are shown different states of his life, and a big section of that is him serving in World War II, and he was taken as a prisoner of war by Germany, as he was an American soldier, and he was taken to Dresden before it was bombed. So he's witnessed traumatic things, and Kurt Vonnegut, actually, that's what happened to him. He was taken as prisoner of war, and he was in Dresden when it happened, and he survived only because he's in somewhere called Slaughterhouse-Five. And so yeah, it's based on many of his own experiences, and he wrote this as a form of catharsis. And it's a comedy in many ways, but it's dark comedy. It's like there are funny moments, but the catalyst for why it's happening is not funny at all. And this is science fiction in the sense that there are elements that do not happen on this world, but it can be explained a way to be historical fiction in the way that I believe is that it is a result of Billy Pilgrim's PTSD, the trauma that he's experienced, and the science fiction elements are a way to explain them to himself and really just to try and carry on and live his life. And so yeah, that's Slaughterhouse-Five. Very quirky, very funny, but with some very deep moments, and it's very philosophical and thought-provoking. And it's a classic for a reason.
There we go.
So there we go. That is everything that we have talked about today. All our historical fiction recommendations. So we've got classical Dark Ages / early medieval period, the medieval period, the early modern, and the modern. So hopefully somewhere in there is something for you. And if not, we're happy to always recommend more. Ask in the comments below. If you want a future video on a different type of recommendation, please again do let us know in the comments below. But everyone, thank you so much for hanging around. Hopefully you enjoyed, and truth and courage, the Brothers Gwynne.
Truth and courage, the Brothers Gwynne.